This interview is part of the Living Legends collection of the Oklahoma Historical Society. It is an interview with Major General Hal Muldrow. He was interviewed in Norman, Oklahoma by Bernard Kellner on August 4th, 1971.
Norman, Oklahoma, 4th of August, 1971. Lieutenant Colonel Bernard Kellner in Oklahoma City, retired, interviewing Major General Hal Muldrow, who will reminisce for the edification of future generations on his experiences and his family's experiences in Oklahoma and the Oklahoma Territory.
Colonel, I'm going to start out some time back. My family moved to Norman from Tishomingo, which was then Indian Territory, at the time of my birth in 1905. Our family came here in 1914 for the purpose of educating the 5 children in the family through the University of Oklahoma. And there was one of we children in school for many, many years. I finished grade school in Norman and then spent 1 year coaching at Capitol Hill in Oklahoma City before going to the university. While at the university, during 4 years, I received a BS degree in business and played football for 3 years on the varsity football team. In 1929, I was married to Clara May Bell of Purcell, and we have lived in Norman ever since, with the exception of the war years. In 1929, I accepted the position as football and basketball coach of Norman High School and coached there from 1929 through 1933. In 1929, after receiving a commission from the university in the field artillery branch of the service, in 1928, I joined the 45th Infantry Division. In 1935, I attended the battery officers course for 3 months at Fort Sill, and was very fortunate that I had attended that school, because it placed me in a much better position when the 45th was inducted in September 1940. Now, in 1940, the 45th Division at the time of induction was a square division, which meant that there was an artillery brigade and 2 infantry brigades. The men and officers of the division were composed of troops from Oklahoma, Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona. One infantry brigade, which was the 90th Brigade, which was composed of the 179th Infantry and 180th Infantry, were from Oklahoma. The 89th Brigade, composed of the 157th and 158th Infantry, were from Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona. The Engineer Regiment, and it was a regiment at that time, was principally in New Mexico. However, there was 1 battalion in Oklahoma. After induction, upon induction, we were sent to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and remained there until the spring of 1941, at which time the division was transported overland in their own transportation to Camp Barkley, Texas, west of Abilene. This was a tent camp, and our surroundings were much different than they had been in Fort Sill, although we lived in tents at Fort Sill. In early 1942, the division was transferred by rail to Fort Devens, Massachusetts, and we were in training there for several months, with some of our training in New York. Going back to 1941, the division was reorganized and made into a triangular division, which meant that the 2 infantry brigades and the artillery brigade were dissolved. The 89th Brigade was separated from the division, and the brigade was separated from the artillery. The artillery then consisted of 5 separate battalions, and the infantry of 3 infantry regiments. After leaving the state of New York, near Watertown, where we were stationed, the division was then sent to Camp Pickett, Virginia, for the final conclusion of our training. In the summer of 1943, the division shipped overseas and landed at Oran, North Africa. After some few days in that port, we received secret orders to sail out of the Mediterranean to points unknown. There were only a few officers in the division that knew of our destination. On the 9th of July, we landed on the southern shores of Sicily, which was the first combat the 45th Division had. This was the first amphibious operation, which was the first of 4 amphibious operations that the division made. After perhaps a month of fighting in Sicily, the island fell to the American forces. Our next amphibious landing was at Salerno on the peninsula of Italy. We fought in this battle for a long, long time. After coming to a standstill in our advance, we were again pulled out and made the amphibious operation at the Anzio beachhead. This operation lasted some 4 months, and during the 5th month, we joined forces from the forces that came up through the monastery and took Rome on the same day that the Normandy invasion started. At that time, the division had been in combat over a year when the Normandy invasion started. The next amphibious operation was in southern France. This was in the fall of '44, and the division fought continuously until we received a ceasefire order on May the 4th of 1945 that there would be no more fighting in Europe. At that time, the division was on the outskirts of Munich, Germany, and part of the division was in Germany. It was in Munich.
General, were there any instances in this operation or in the life there that was peculiar or significant and may worthwhile to remember?
I think the many things that were worthwhile in all of our combat, I think one of the closest things was the close friendships that many men and officers made that continue to this day. Every Christmas I receive postcards from some of my men as far away as Europe, which, although is nothing but a Christmas greeting, means a great deal to me. And I see many officers from time to time that I served under and that others that served under me. And I have a great respect and admiration for these people, although World War II has been over many years. After World War II was over, the division was reorganized again. And at that time, Major General James C. Stern, who had formerly been the division artillery executive and chief of staff of the division, took over the command of the division. And I was made a brigadier general. This was in the year of 1946. I have never known a man that I respected and admired any more than I do Major General James C. Stern, retired, who now resides in Hobart, Oklahoma. He was not only a civilian soldier, but he was also a graduate of West Point, and in my opinion was one of the finest officers I have ever known.
General, would you care to remark about the several or the new number of key commanders like General Stern that you experienced in your life with the 45th?
We were very lucky in our senior officers. During World War I was a lieutenant colonel, and when we went overseas, we were blessed with senior officers. General McLean was the artillery commander, Raymond S. McLean. To show you his influence and his superiority when the war was over, he was a corps commander. General Troy Middleton, that came to us while we were at Fort Devens, Massachusetts, who was a World War I veteran, and at the time he came to us had been the comptroller at Louisiana State University in Baton Rouge, was another very fine officer. He also ended up at the end of the war as a corps commander. General Stern, who was chief of staff, of course, commanded the division in Korea. And altogether, I can think of no one that had better leadership than the 45th Division had. After reorganization in 1946, the division continued its training, and in 1950 was again inducted at Camp Oak, Louisiana. We trained there for about 3 months and very suddenly received orders that we would go to Hokkaido, the northernmost island of Japan, to complete our training and complete our field force tests. This was a very fast move, and it caught many people unaware of the seriousness of the Korean War, as there had been no National Guard divisions called. I think it's very important to people of Oklahoma that in 1940 the 45th Division was one of the first 4 divisions called, and again in 1950 was one of the first 4 called. And in the Korean War, it was one of only 2 National Guard divisions that went to Korea, the other being the 40th Infantry Division of California. After completing our training in about 3 months in Hokkaido, Japan, we very suddenly again received alert to go to Korea and relieve the 1st Cavalry Division that had been in combat for some time. In the summer of 1952, most of the original Oklahomans had returned home under the point system, as we received points both in Japan and in Korea towards our return. In 1953, the division was again asked to be reorganized. With the nucleus of officers that we had, everything turned out in very good shape. In the meantime, General Stern had retired, and I assumed command of the division in 1952, late 52, and continued to command the division until September of 1960. Since that time, I have more or less lost contact with the intricacies of training a division. However, I will always have the deepest respect and admiration for the men and officers that serve in this organization.
What is your status, military speaking, right now?
I am completely out, Colonel. I am Major General, AUS, retired.
General, my curiosity has always been aroused, and I wanted to ask someone directly who knew and was there about the fire direction at Anvio Beach, where the Germans were about to give the 45th a darn good flowering and push them off in the ocean. But I've always thought that they utilized direct fire with artillery. And it was my thinking that since General McLean had been a machine gun officer in World War II, which had all the attributes of artillery, yet was rifle firing, his knowledge of that direct firing was the thing that gave him direction in how to handle this German and save the day.
Colonel, it's quite true that the firing at Anzio was terrific. We never moved position for 4.5 months. However, the particular incident I think you're referring to was at Salerno. On the 3rd day of the invasion, the German tanks, which were overlooking the division from very high mountainous ground, made a spearhead into our lines. The fiercest action was at the intersection, or the junction, of the Salee and the Calore River. In the 189th Field Artillery, which I commanded at that time, we had one battery across the bridge which had been blown out. The other 2 batteries were still behind the bridge. General Raymond S. McLean met me on the road, and in order to try to alleviate the pressing situation we were in with our tank destroyers being held up by German armor, I personally saw General McLean in a Jeep mounted with a 50 caliber machine gun, which was mounted on the Jeep, and his driver ran the gauntlet and went through the tank destroyer battalion of our forces and penetrated the German armor to where within a few days the situation had calmed down and we were on our way in our attack. The situation that you referred to as far as direct laying was also my battalion that was on the south side of the river. We were firing direct fire at about 500 yards with 155 howitzers, and our 155 howitzer projectile weighs approximately 100 pounds. So you can see that things were pretty tough there for a while. I want to, while I'm talking, express my sincere appreciation and admiration for another officer that I worked with for many years, Brigadier General Ottawa T. Autry, who is now Superintendent of Schools in Enid, Oklahoma. Started out in 1940 as a battery commander in the whole 189th Field Artillery Regiment. Upon triangularization, he was made battalion executive of the 189th and was my executive throughout World War II. When the division was reorganized in 1946, I asked then Major Autry to take command of the 189th Field Artillery, which he very gladly did. He went to Korea and Japan commanding the 189th, and it was an excellent outfit. In 1952, when we again reorganized, I asked General Autry to command the entire division artillery, which he did, and for which he received his star as a brigadier general. He retired in about 1963.
General, you've given us your experience in North as a family and your military experience. I believe that it would be of interest to record your family background, your father, your mother, that their origin, influence in the life, because these were rugged days in the early days, even around North.
My mother and father are both deceased at this time. My father died when we were in Korea, and I was not able to come back to attend his funeral. My mother died in 1956. My mother was born in the Indian Territory of Oklahoma. She was a quarter breed Choctaw Indian and lived in Oklahoma all of her life. My father was born in Paducah, Kentucky, and he lost his father when my father was 1 year old. He then moved to Mississippi and was raised by his older brothers. During the Indian Territory days, he was with the United States Geological Survey and came to Oklahoma with a party that helped lay out the section lines and the railroads in eastern Oklahoma. This is where he met my mother at Tishomingo, Oklahoma. In 1914, the family moved, as I said before, from Tishomingo to Norman, and they both died while being residents of this community.